My daughter said I was holding her back. So I handed her something she couldn't refuse. I never imagined my own daughter would look me in the eye and destroy me with words. It happened on a Tuesday evening in my living room, the same room where I taught her to walk, where we'd celebrated every birthday, every achievement. "You've done nothing but hold me back, Dad," she screamed, her face twisted with rage I didn't recognize. "I need you out of my life." The words hit like physical blows, each syllable designed to wound. Behind her stood her husband, arms crossed, nodding in silent agreement. My granddaughter played upstairs, oblivious to the destruction happening below. I stood frozen, trying to process how we'd arrived at this moment. 28 years of sacrifice, of working double shifts, of putting her needs before everything, reduced to this accusation. She stomped toward the stairs, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floors I'd installed myself. The slam of her bedroom door echoed through the house, leaving me standing alone in suffocating silence. Couldn't sleep that night. Around midnight, I went to the kitchen for water and heard voices drifting from the guest room where my daughter and her husband stayed. The door wasn't fully closed. I shouldn't have listened, but something made me stop. "Your mother's right," the husband said, his voice smug and certain. "He's dead weight, dragging us down with his outdated ideas about money and family." My daughter laughed. Actually laughed. "Once we get him out of the way, the money and the house will finally be ours," she replied. The glass in my hand trembled. I'd suspected manipulation, maybe some resentment, but this was calculated betrayal. They weren't just frustrated with me, they were plotting. Through the crack in the door, I saw them on speakerphone with the mother-in-law, all three discussing me like a problem to eliminate. My chest tightened as realization crashed over me. This wasn't about independence or growth. This was about inheritance, about assets, about greed. I retreated to my study, closing the door carefully behind me. My hands shook as I unlocked the filing cabinet where I kept important documents. There, in a sealed envelope marked, "Last Will and Testament, Revised," lay my insurance policy. 6 months ago, after noticing my daughter's increasing entitlement and her husband's suspicious interest in my finances, I'd updated everything. The new will was explicit. Unless my daughter demonstrated true financial independence and personal growth, every asset would go to established charities supporting foster children. She had no idea this document existed. My original will, the one she'd probably already counted on, had been voided. I sat back in my leather chair, the same one I'd bought when she graduated college, and whispered to myself, "So that's what this is about." The betrayal stung less when I realized I'd been preparing for this possibility. Tomorrow things would change. I would show them what holding back really looked like. The next morning I made calls. First to the bank, canceling the automatic transfers that covered their car insurance, their daughter's private school tuition, the monthly help with their mortgage. Then to my accountant, instructing him to close the credit card I'd given my daughter for emergencies, the one she'd used for spa days and designer handbags. My financial advisor listened carefully as I restructured everything, putting walls between my assets and their grasping hands. "Are you sure about this?" he asked gently. I thought about their conversation last night, their laughter at my expense. Absolutely certain. Within hours, the machinery of my quiet withdrawal began turning. No dramatic announcements, no confrontations, just the silent removal of the safety net they'd taken for granted. 3 days later, my phone exploded with calls from my daughter. "Dad, why did the tuition check bounce?" she demanded, her voice sharp with panic. "The school is threatening to remove my daughter from enrollment." If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. They cornered me in my own kitchen that evening, a coordinated ambush. My daughter stood with her arms crossed, her husband looming behind her like hired muscle. "What's going on with you, Dad?" she began, her tone mixing concern with accusation. "You forgot to pay the tuition. You forgot our car insurance was due. The mortgage payment didn't go through." Her husband jumped in. "We're worried about you. Maybe you're getting forgetful, confused. It happens at your age." The gaslighting was blatant, almost insulting in its transparency. They wanted me to doubt myself, to feel incompetent, to hand over control willingly. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate calm and met my daughter's eyes. "I haven't forgotten anything," I said quietly. "I've simply decided it's time you manage your own expenses." The silence stretched uncomfortably. My daughter's face flushed red. "Are you serious right now? We depend on that help. We've built our lives around my money," I finished. "Maybe it's time you learn to manage without me." The mother-in-law arrived 2 days later, uninvited and unwelcome. She swept into my home like she owned it, immediately pulling my daughter aside for whispered conferences. I heard fragments. "Jealous of your success? Trying to control you? Cutting him off completely is the only answer." The poison dripped steadily, and my daughter drank it eagerly. Over the following week, the mother-in-law became a permanent fixture, staying in my guest room, reorganizing my kitchen, making herself comfortable in my space. She treated me with thinly veiled contempt, speaking over me during meals, dismissing my opinions on everything. One night, unable to sleep again, I came downstairs for water around 2 in the morning. A light glowed from my study. Through the partially open door, I saw her, the mother-in-law, rifling through my desk drawers with quick, practiced movements. She photographed documents with her phone, searching for something specific. I realized. Financial statements. Anything that would reveal my plans. I watched from the shadows, letting her search. She wouldn't find what she was looking for. Not there. Instead of confronting them about the late-night snooping, I changed tactics. I called my daughter to my study the next afternoon, her husband and mother-in-law joining as expected. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, my voice deliberately tired and defeated. "You're right. I should help you more systematically, more officially." I slid a document across the desk. A loan agreement professionally drafted with clear terms and repayment schedules. $50,000, I explained, "for your immediate needs. But this time we do it properly with legal documentation." They exchanged glances, barely suppressing their smugness. To them, this was surrender, proof I was caving to pressure. The husband grabbed a pen immediately. "This is very generous, Dad," my daughter said, already signing. "We'll pay you back, of course." The mother-in-law watched with satisfaction, believing she'd successfully manipulated me into compliance. They didn't read the fine print, the clauses about default penalties, the accelerated repayment triggers, the legal consequences of non-payment. As they signed, I tucked away the notarized papers with a knowing smile forming. Let them celebrate. The trap was set. Spring arrived, and with it cracks in their facade. I heard through mutual friends that the husband had lost his job 3 months earlier, but was hiding it from everyone, including my daughter. He left for work each morning, spent days at coffee shops, and returned home at normal hours, maintaining the deception perfectly. Meanwhile, bills accumulated. Their mortgage payment bounced first, then utilities, then car payments. The bank called me. I'd been listed as an emergency contact about their financial troubles. "They're 2 months behind," the loan officer explained. "We wanted to reach out before beginning foreclosure procedures." I thanked her for the call and did nothing. No rescue, no intervention. This was their independence in action. At their house one evening for a tense dinner, my daughter served an unusually modest meal, noticeably cheaper than her usual standards. Her husband's smile seemed forced, stressed. The mother-in-law dominated conversation, filling silences with criticism of everyone except herself. Nobody mentioned their mounting financial crisis. The explosion happened over dessert, store-bought cookies instead of my daughter's usual elaborate presentations. She'd been drinking wine steadily throughout dinner, her inhibitions dissolving. "You know what, Dad?" she said suddenly, her voice loud and bitter. "You're toxic. You've always been toxic, trying to control everything with your money." Her husband shifted uncomfortably but didn't defend me. The mother-in-law nodded encouragingly. "Once we have our own," my daughter continued, gesturing vaguely at nothing. "Once we're truly independent, we won't need you at all. We'll be free of your manipulation." My granddaughter sat frozen, her cookie untouched, sensing the adult tension she couldn't understand. I stood slowly, placing my napkin on the table with deliberate calm. Everyone watched, expecting an outburst, tears, or desperate apologies. Instead, I smiled. "You'll need me sooner than you think?" I said quietly, collecting my coat. As I walked to the door, my daughter shouted after me, but I didn't turn back. The game was accelerating toward its inevitable conclusion. The discovery happened on a Saturday morning. My daughter's panicked call woke me at 7. "Dad, I need to talk to you immediately." She arrived within the hour, her husband trailing behind, both looking disheveled and frightened. "There's been a mistake," she said, spreading bank statements across my kitchen table. "The savings account you set up for me years ago, the one you said was mine for emergencies, it's empty. The bank says it was never actually in my name." I sipped my coffee calmly. "That's correct." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" "That account was established for your benefit, with me as the sole legal owner. I maintained it as long as I chose to. I closed it 3 weeks ago." The husband exploded from his chair. "What do you mean your dad didn't include you? You said we had 40,000 in emergency savings. We've been counting on that money." My daughter turned on him, realization dawning. "You knew about this?" Their argument escalated while I watched silently. The foundation of their financial planning, built on my money they'd assumed would always be accessible, had just vanished. If you're hooked on this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more compelling tales like this one. 2 weeks later, I received a tearful call. My daughter's voice was small, defeated. "Dad, I'm sorry about how I spoke to you. We've been under so much stress." I let the silence stretch. "We want to make things right," she continued. "Actually, we have an opportunity. There's a house. Perfect for us, great neighborhood, amazing schools for your granddaughter. But we need help with the down payment." Here it came, the real reason for the apology. "If you co-sign with us, we can get approved. Please, Dad. This could be our fresh start, our chance to finally be stable." I pretended to consider, letting hope build in the silence. "Let me think about it," I finally said. 3 days later, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop and I outlined my terms. I'd co-sign and provide the down payment, but only if we structured it properly. They nodded eagerly to everything, desperate for my cooperation. The mother-in-law wasn't present this time. They'd strategically excluded her, knowing I wouldn't agree with her influence. The couple cheered when I signed the preliminary agreement, believing they'd finally beaten me. The actual signing happened at the title company on a bright Tuesday morning. Mountains of paperwork covered the conference table, standard closing documents mixed with additional agreements my lawyer had prepared. The real estate agent walked us through each section rapidly, the monotony of legal language creating the perfect cover. My daughter and her husband signed repeatedly, barely reading, eager to complete the process. "Just need your signatures here, here, and here," the agent directed, flipping pages efficiently. Buried in the co-signing agreement was a clause my lawyer had crafted beautifully. If they defaulted on any payment within the first 3 years, full property control would revert to me until the debt was satisfied. Another clause specified that my name would remain on the deed regardless of their payment history. They signed everything, their attention focused only on finally owning a home, on escaping their current financial mess. As we left, I collected my copies of every document with their fresh signatures and said softly, "Now the game begins." They didn't hear me, already celebrating their new house. The mother-in-law's fury at being excluded from the house purchase was spectacular. She descended on my daughter with calculated precision, rebuilding her influence. "He's controlling you again," she hissed during family gatherings. "You'll never be free while his name is on anything." Over coffee, she introduced a new idea: financial emancipation. "There are legal ways to completely sever financial ties," she explained. "You could declare yourself independent, nullify any claims he has on your life." My daughter, exhausted from juggling bills and hiding her husband's unemployment, embraced the idea desperately. 2 weeks later, a process server knocked on my door. Legal papers declared their intention to sever all financial relationships, to declare themselves completely independent. "You're no longer needed," the document stated in cold legal language. They'd filed for a court order preventing me from any involvement in their finances or property decisions. I read through everything carefully, noting the date they'd chosen, right before their first major mortgage payment would come due. The timing was suspiciously convenient. I signed the papers without argument, my signature steady and controlled. The process server seemed surprised by my calm acceptance. "Most people want to fight these," she said. "Not me," I replied. "If that's what they want, I respect their decision." But behind the scenes, emergency meetings filled my calendar. My lawyer, my accountant, and my financial advisor gathered in my study, reviewing every document, every agreement, every clause. "They've made a critical error," my lawyer explained, spreading papers across the desk. "By filing for financial emancipation while still under contract for loans you co-signed, they've triggered several default clauses. And the timing means they can't use your future support to qualify for refinancing." We drafted responses, prepared legal filings, and organized documentation. Everything was set in motion quietly, professionally, without drama. When my daughter called to gloat about their freedom, I congratulated her sincerely. "I hope this brings you the independence you've been seeking," I said. She hung up, satisfied she'd finally beaten me. I murmured to myself, "Let them think they've won." Their house of cards collapsed with stunning speed. Freed from my controlling influence and certain they'd won, they spent recklessly. New furniture arrived, expensive cars appeared in the driveway, and my daughter posted constant social media updates about their independent success. Friends and neighbors received breathless updates about their liberation from my toxic manipulation. The mother-in-law hosted a celebration at their new house, declaring victory over my supposed tyranny. But debt collectors began circling like sharks sensing blood. First came polite calls, then formal letters, then increasingly aggressive contact. The husband's continued unemployment meant no income, only mounting credit card debt. The mortgage payment came due, $3,000 they didn't have. Late fees accumulated. Then came the utilities, the car payments, the insurance premiums. One morning, a bright red notice appeared on their front door. Repossession warning for both vehicles. Neighbors slowed down while walking past, reading the public notice. My daughter tore it down frantically, but the damage was done. Their perfect image was crumbling publicly, humiliatingly. The certified letter arrived at their house on a Monday morning. My lawyer had drafted it precisely, every word calculated for maximum legal impact. Due to default on loan obligations and triggered penalty clauses per our signed agreement dated March 15th, legal ownership of property at 342 Birch Street will revert to Thomas Henderson pending court proceedings. Since they defaulted on the loan I'd co-signed, and since they'd severed our financial relationship without clearing existing obligations, the property automatically became mine under the terms they'd signed. The house, their dream home, their fresh start, was legally mine now. My lawyer delivered a second document, a formal eviction notice giving them 30 days to vacate. My daughter called screaming, her voice so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You can't do this. This is our home. Read the contract you signed," I said calmly. "Every clause is legally binding." Her husband grabbed the phone. "We'll fight this. We'll take you to court." "Please do," I replied. "Bring your copy of the contract. Bring your lawyer. Show them where I've violated any terms." The silence that followed was everything. They stared at the documents in horror, finally reading what they'd signed. She arrived at my house the next morning without warning, pounding on the door at sunrise. When I opened it, her face was blotchy from crying, makeup smeared, her usual polish completely gone. "How could you do this?" she screamed before I could even speak. "We're your family. Your granddaughter lives there." I stepped aside, letting her storm into my living room. For 10 minutes she raged about betrayal, about cruelty, about what kind of father would destroy his own daughter. I let her exhaust herself, watching calmly from my chair. When she finally ran out of steam, collapsing onto my couch in tears, I reached into the folder I'd prepared and pulled out the loan papers. "You signed this," I said, placing them before her. You and your husband. You signed the co-signing agreement. You signed the loan terms. You signed the default clauses. She stared at her own signature. You also signed legal papers severing our financial relationship while still owing me money, I continued. You did this to yourself. She looked up, hatred and desperation mixing in her eyes. Who's holding who back now? I asked quietly. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, show your support by liking and subscribing for more stories. The husband appeared that evening, alone. His usual arrogance had vanished, replaced by a desperate, beaten expression. He stood on my porch, shifting his weight nervously. Can we talk? He asked. I invited him inside. Over coffee he didn't touch, the truth spilled out. I lost my job 6 months ago, he admitted, staring at his hands. I've been lying to everyone, pretending to go to work every day. My mother kept pushing me to get more money from you, said it was owed to us, that you were just being controlling. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. She convinced me the house plan would work, that we'd be set once we got your name off everything. I'm so sorry. The confession was pathetic, but illuminating. My daughter wasn't fully innocent, but she'd been manipulated. Before I could respond, the front door burst open. My daughter had followed him. You lied to me too? She screamed at her husband, the betrayal fresh and raw. All this time, no job? No income. Their argument escalated into chaos while I watched, the architect of their revelation. I waited until they'd exhausted themselves before pulling out my phone. There's something else you should know, I said, opening my email. Your mother, I said to the husband, has been messaging me for months. I showed them screenshots, the mother-in-law's texts pushing him to extract more money from me, to manipulate my daughter, to isolate me completely. She's been in contact with her own lawyer, I continued, showing another email, planning to challenge my will, to claim your owed inheritance now rather than waiting. She wanted everything accelerated. The most damaging message was her text to her son. Once the old man is completely isolated, we can push for a conservatorship, declare him incompetent, control everything. My daughter gasped, her hand covering her mouth. She wouldn't, she whispered. She's family. She's poison, I corrected. And you invited her into your marriage, into your decisions, into your life. The realization crashed over my daughter's face. Every push toward independence, every criticism of me, every manipulation had been calculated by someone she trusted. The real villain had been whispering in her ear all along. 3 days later, I called them both to my home. They arrived separately, avoiding each other, their marriage clearly strained to breaking. I sat them down at my dining table, the same table where we'd shared holidays and birthdays in happier times. I'm not going to destroy you, I began, watching relief flood their faces. But I'm not rescuing you either. I laid out my terms clearly, firmly. You will start over without my money, without bailouts, without shortcuts. You'll find real jobs, build real skills, and learn real responsibility. My daughter started to protest, but I held up my hand. More importantly, you'll cut all ties with her, I said, nodding toward the husband. Your mother is no longer welcome in your lives, in your decisions, or anywhere near my granddaughter. The husband bristled. That's my mother. That's your choice, I replied. Her influence or your family's future. Not both. I slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside is your path forward. You can accept it or walk away. They stared at the envelope, understanding this was the turning point. My daughter's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a trust document, professionally drafted and legally airtight. For your daughter, I explained. $50,000 invested conservatively, untouchable until she's 18. Additional contributions on her birthdays and holidays. My granddaughter's future education, her opportunities, her security, all protected from her parents' poor decisions. You can't control this money, I continued. You can't borrow against it, touch it, or use it for anything. It's hers alone. Tears streamed down my daughter's face as she read. The trust ensured her child would have opportunities regardless of what happened to the parents. My son-in-law, still reeling from the condition about his mother, stared at the document in disbelief. "Why would you do this?" he asked. "After everything we did?" I looked at my daughter, seeing past the manipulated adult to the girl I'd raised. "Because I'm her grandfather," I said simply. "And because someone needs to protect the innocent one in all this." My daughter collapsed into sobs, realizing that despite everything, I still cared, just not in the way she'd wanted. The community event was the town's annual summer festival, usually a celebration but this year an unveiling. My daughter and her husband arrived late, trying to slip in unnoticed. But news travels fast in small communities, especially dramatic news. Whispers followed them through the crowd. About repossession, about debt, about the eviction from their dream home. Former friends who'd admired their successful independence now avoided eye contact. The women who'd envied my daughter's lifestyle now huddled together, gossiping. Her carefully constructed image of perfection, of having it all together, crumbled publicly. I watched from across the park as she realized everyone knew. Her face went pale as neighbors turned away, as former friends made excuses to leave conversations, as the social standing she'd valued so highly dissolved. The mother-in-law, surprisingly, was also there, uninvited and unwanted. When she tried approaching my daughter, seeking to comfort and manipulate, my daughter turned her back completely. The message was clear. That alliance was over. I stood silently near the refreshment table, saying nothing, doing nothing. The truth spoke loudly enough without my intervention. She came to my house the following Tuesday evening, alone. No husband, no mother-in-law, no anger, just exhaustion and defeat. I opened the door to find her holding a small bouquet of daisies, my late wife's favorite flower. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small. Inside, over tea, she apologized. Not the performative, manipulative apologies from before, but genuine contrition. "I was so wrong, Dad. About everything. I let her poison my mind against you. I confused your help with control, your concern with manipulation." Tears dripped into her tea. "I don't know how to fix this." I set down my cup carefully. "Respect is earned, not demanded," I said, repeating words my own father had told me decades ago. "You can't undo what you've done with apologies. Words are cheap when trust is broken." She nodded, accepting the harsh truth. "So what now?" she asked. I studied my daughter, genuinely humbled for perhaps the first time in her adult life. "Now you prove you've learned," I replied. "Now you show me through actions, not words, that you understand what family actually means." She looked up hopefully. "How?" I laid out the redemption test clearly, leaving no room for misunderstanding. "First, you cut all contact with the mother-in-law. Completely, permanently. She's the poison that corrupted your judgment." My daughter nodded without hesitation. "Second, you get a job, any job. I don't care if it's entry-level or beneath your education. You show up, work hard, and support yourself." She swallowed but nodded again. "Third, your husband does the same. No more lying, no more hiding, no more pretending. Real work, real accountability." The terms were harsh but necessary. "You have 6 months to prove you can stand on your own. If you succeed, we'll discuss restoring some support, limited, conditional support. If you fail or if you fall back into old patterns, this relationship ends permanently." My daughter sat silently, processing the ultimatum. Everything hung in balance. Her marriage, her relationship with me, her daughter's future, her entire world. "Can I do this?" she whispered, more to herself than to me. "That's your choice," I replied. "I've given you the path. Walking it is up to you." She hesitated, tears streaming down her face, her entire future depending on her next words. 2 weeks later, she returned with documents. Employment contracts from a local retail chain for both her and her husband. Modest pay, humble positions, but honest work. She'd also brought a legal separation agreement from the mother-in-law, a restraining order preventing contact with the grandchild. "I'm doing this," she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard in months. For my daughter, for us, for what's right. I reviewed everything carefully. The jobs were real, the commitment genuine. She'd sold their remaining luxury items, designer bags, expensive jewelry, to cover immediate debts. Her husband had written me a letter of genuine apology, acknowledging his weakness and manipulation. It wasn't perfect redemption, but it was a start. I retrieved one final document from my desk, the agreement I'd prepared. This outlines our new relationship, I explained. Mutual respect, healthy boundaries, honest communication. You stand on your own, but I remain as support, not as a crutch. She signed without hesitation, her hand steady. As she prepared to leave, I stopped her. You thought I held you back, I said quietly, the words carrying years of pain and wisdom. But I was holding you up. Now stand on your own. She embraced me, crying, understanding finally washing over her. Outside, the sunset painted the sky orange and gold. The husband and mother-in-law had lost everything. Their scheme, their control, their credibility. But my daughter, humbled and rebuilt, had a chance. I walked her to the door, watching her drive away to her new modest apartment, her new humble job, her new honest life. The game was over, and for the first time in years, I felt like I'd won something worth having. The possibility of real family, built on truth instead of manipulation.